Hey everybody, I am coming to you with an episode on scheduling sex. It's kind of a hotly debated topic in our field, and we will get into it in detail in a moment. So first, we're going to read the review of the week this week. These reviews are so nice. Thank you guys. So this one says, Heather is whip smart. I love this podcast because Heather is fearless, smart, empathetic, and always willing to quote unquote go there. No topic is off limits, and she always approaches her guests with a level of curiosity and respect. Just incredible and entertaining conversation. Must listen. So thank you so much for this review. I honestly appreciate it. And you're right. There's no topic that's off limits. That's a big part of, why I do what I do, because sometimes we think, oh, well, I can't talk about that, and sometimes we just think that like we're the only weirdo or, it's just not okay for some reason, but it's okay. We got to accept all the parts of ourselves. So that is what we're going to talk about today with scheduling sex. So a couple things here. There's a huge camp of people who is anti-scheduling, right? And let's discuss why that might be the case. We think that if we schedule sex, basically it's not going to be sexy. I think that's the big fear that people have. It's like, what? We have to schedule it like a business meeting or what, And I think that we have these associations with scheduling like, oh, we've gotten to that point in our relationship where like now we're so almost like hard up that we have to schedule it. And you can probably tell by my tone of voice that I don't love these arguments, right? And we'll get into my personal opinion at the end. So that would be one argument that was like, it just feels like a task then. It feels like a chore. It doesn't really feel like fun or sexy. Yeah, it's almost like a turn off. Just the idea of scheduling it can be a turn off for a lot of people. On the camp of, yes, let's schedule sex, we have, well, it's just not going to happen otherwise. It's like we're like ships passing in the night, right? Which is the case for a surprising number of couples. Those people are kind of like, if we wait till right before bed, we're too tired. Or, one of us is like kind of not with it for the first couple hours of the morning. And then we have like the work day in the middle. And then we have like kid stuff, on the weekends. And like, this is the reality for a lot of people. So they're like, we might as well schedule it. What my personal opinion is that it depends on your situation, right? So if you're newly dating and neither of you has children, neither of you is caring for, a parent or has any kind of major commitments, your work hours are reasonable, it's, pretty easy to find time to spend together. Generally speaking, I don't think those people need to schedule sex, right? They might want to, I don't know, but I don't think that you typically need to. We can also just, how complex do we want to get with this discussion? But, there's a lot of other factors too. So if you're somebody where your sex drive is more spontaneous in general, and what that means is that you just kind of get horny and in the mood out of nowhere, right? And that's okay, right? There's not a good or a bad. The other side of that coin would be more of a responsive sexual desire. So spontaneous is going to be, it kind of comes up out of nowhere. It's almost just like this from within biological thing. Nothing in particular triggers it. And a lot of us think that that's kind of how sex drive should be. But the other type is responsive. And so a responsive sex drive is going to be triggered more by some kind of sexual stimuli. So it could be something like, seeing an attractive person walk down the street, or even feeling sexy yourself. Someone maybe gives you a compliment, or you just feel like you look extra cute that day, or maybe you take a dance class and that just kind of starts putting you in the mood. It could be something as, explicit as porn, and it could be something, as surprising as a dance class, right? Or just like, oh, okay, like I just felt like I put a cute outfit on. I think it's important to keep this in mind. So if you've got a partner, or maybe both partners in a relationship who are more responsive, it could also just be the case that without those sexual stimuli in your environment, you're not really getting in the mood, even if you do have the time. So that's an important factor to consider too. So I feel like you're probably starting to sense my answer to this, like most things, is not a one size fits all approach. It's really like, let's look at your specific situation and see what's the best fit for you, what makes sense for you. Now, one other thing I want to add on the pro side of scheduling sex is that, and also to kind of dismantle the con side a little bit, is typically when you're first dating, you schedule your dates, right? And then you don't think, oh, this is such a chore. I have to go on a date with this person. We have to schedule it. And then when do you have sex? On your dates, right? So I think we just need to do a reframe here, because what happens is, I'll work with these couples and I'll hear from people. It's like, well, we're just not getting around to having sex unless we schedule it. If that's the case, 100% schedule some time. Now, I also want to clarify, what are you scheduling? Right? Because you've heard me talk before about, we don't want to get so attached to the outcome with sex that we're kind of taking the fun out of it. And so if it's like, oh my God, we blocked out an hour and the kids are gone and, my parents took them or the babysitter took them or whatever. And then we're like, oh God, we're supposed to have sex now. And it just feels like all this pressure and like not fun at all. So what I would say is, and I think what most sex therapists say too, is don't schedule actual like orgasmic activity, but schedule some quality time, schedule some intimacy, be a little intentional about it. Sex might happen, right? But we don't want to make it a pressure cooker. It's kind of like when you were dating. Right? So when you're dating, you schedule something fun. You schedule time when you don't have distractions. You create the conditions where something sexy could happen, right? You dress up a little bit, you look cute, you plan something fun to do, and then a lot of times it winds up happening. The other really cool piece of this is the anticipation. So one of the cornerstones of eroticism, according to Jack Morin's book, The Erotic Mind, is anticipation. And I think this is a big one for most of us. So if you schedule quality time for intimacy to happen, time to create the conditions for potential sex, then you get to look forward to that. Then you can kind of flirt. It's like when you had a date coming up, you'd be like, oh, I can't wait to see you. Or, I'm going to wear that sexy skirt that you like. Or maybe a little sexting, especially if this is somebody you've already had sex with and already have that level of comfort with, which it probably is if we're talking about this topic. So keep that in mind too. Scheduling it can build anticipation. And maybe you buy something sexy to wear. Maybe you buy a toy for your partner. Maybe you are verbal about it. Maybe you kind of know, ooh, okay, this is coming. How can I make this special for my partner? How can I make this special for myself? How can I hint or tease, right? I think teasing is a great way to build anticipation. We also do this in marketing. Sometimes I do this with the podcast, right? Where on Instagram, I might be like, teaser, we're going to have this special guest coming on Monday. Stay tuned, right? And it builds anticipation. And so it's like that anticipation and craving can lead to really hot sex. So instead of looking at it, so you can see we've reframed it like a 180. So instead of looking at it like, oh my God, we're such failures. We've gotten to this point where we're scheduling something that's supposed to be spontaneous. So instead of that, we totally flip the script and we think, because most of us, the sex was, kind of hot at the beginning and the chemistry was really there. And so we're like, oh, so what if we're actually kind of going back to that honeymoon stage a little bit where, we're scheduling dates, we're scheduling quality time, we're putting effort into our appearance, we're, wondering what's going to happen. I also like not scheduling orgasmic activities for that reason, just scheduling time for intimacy, because it's kind of fun a little bit to wonder what's going to happen and to sort of bring your A game, when you're dating, you're kind of bringing your A game and you're like, okay, we kissed last time. I kind of want more to happen this time, but I don't know what's going to happen. So it's your own little sexy story unfolding. So that's my 2 cents. And I will also share, if you're scheduling sex from a place of, obligation, which I think I've mentioned this in past episodes, but, when I was in a long-term relationship, I started losing my interest in sex with this person, and eventually he started losing his, but there was this thought of well, we mostly see each other on the weekends because we live an hour apart and, we should be having sex. And I would say if that's the case for you guys, like it was for me, scheduling sex may not be the way to go, right? Because sometimes then you're forcing something or pressuring something. And in those cases, there's actually a deeper issue going on. And so like, look at the deeper issue, right? Don't just think that's what we're missing. Now, on the other hand, if it's like, no, I think my partner's hot, I'm interested, I just kind of need to be like out of work mode, out of like stressful fight or flight mode, be in like a whole different nervous system state where like I'm relaxed, I'm ready to have fun, and then I can look forward to it and I want to be intimate with this person. If that's the case where life is just kind of getting in the way or schedules are just getting in the way, you are the perfect candidate for scheduling sex. And it also doesn't matter how often, because I know you guys are probably thinking like, well, how often, Heather? There is research that shows couples who have sex at least once a week kind of, and I'm going to do a caveat on this, kind of max out their relationship satisfaction. So like if they go up to twice a week, they're not necessarily any happier or more satisfied in the relationship. There are totally exceptions to this. I mean, I've talked to numerous people who want to have sex 3 times a day, right? And so like they're just not going to be happy or satisfied with once a week. And so you have to customize it to yourself. That's the limitation of studies. They're based on averages. They're not based on, individual cases. And there's going to be other people that are like more than happy with every other week. They're like, yeah, as long as we're having quality time to connect, the frequency isn't as important. Or maybe the sex drive just isn't as high. And that's fine. There's no right or wrong, but that's worth discussing. If you're going to schedule it, how often do you want to schedule it? How much time do you want to allow? Of course, like what times are going to work. And often one of the other huge things that I hear from people that often is an easy solve or can be solved is childcare. It's kind of like, oh yeah, but we have the kids. And usually there can be either family members that can help, sometimes friends that can help, and you might have to pay extra money. And I know sometimes people are like, oh my God, but we already are like going out to dinner, we're paying for dinner. Do we really have to pay and babysitters have gotten expensive. I've heard $20 an hour, but $15-20 an hour for a babysitter on top of it. And it's like, yeah, that's a lot cheaper than my services, right? It's a lot cheaper than, relationship counseling. It's a lot cheaper than divorce. So much cheaper. And then we also have to look at like how important are our relationships, like our relationships, like, okay, well, I don't want to spend, $80 or $70 on a babysitter twice a month. But it's like, what are you getting in exchange for that? Happy relationship? An actual sex life? That seems like a good deal to me. So sometimes it's like we cheap out on the stuff that really matters. Now, if you're in a situation where it's just like, hey, money's tight, whatever, then you might have to get a little more creative. And maybe you do a swap with some friends. Maybe it's like you alternate weekends. They watch your kids, you watch their kids. But like there's always a solution, right? And so I don't want people to get stuck on that, but it's worth it. It's like so worth putting the time and energy into finding those solutions so that you can make the time, right? Maybe it means somebody has to be less of a workaholic. Maybe it means you have to work on the childcare. Maybe it means that you have to change your work schedule even and do a 4-day week or work a little earlier or later, or even like look for a different job that's, going to be more conducive. And I guess I would just say like that's worth it. I mean, typically the regrets that people have when they're like in hospice and dying is not like, oh, I wish I worked more. It's like, I wish I really invested more in my relationships. Here I am reminding you of that before you get to that point. So don't hesitate to schedule sex. The key is to be honest with yourself. Like if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine being at that point. Well, first of all, life changes. We go through different phases. And if you're in a phase where you're able to be spontaneous and enjoy it and it's working for you, awesome, enjoy it. But if you're listening to this, know, and this is something that Dr. Marty Klein mentions in his book, Sexual Intelligence, which is great. And that was like the first sex therapy book I ever read. It's like reevaluate every decade or so, where's our sex drive? I would actually reevaluate more than that. What's our schedules like? What really works for us? Reset your expectations because things change. And it can be easy to think okay, it's different now. Maybe we have to be more conscious or intentional or put in a little bit more effort, but that doesn't mean it's bad, because there's also research that some of the best sex doesn't even start until about age 55. So that's important to keep in mind too. So just because things are different doesn't mean they're worse. You can have, more orgasms, more pleasure, more connection, more real intimacy as you get older. And maybe, just maybe, scheduling is going to help with that. So thank you guys for listening to this. I also wanted to mention, if you are wanting to invest a little bit more time and attention into your sex life, but in a super flexible kind of way, I am having a new Sexy Summer book club. So I've wanted to do a book club for a long time. I think books are one of the most amazing investments in our minds, and in this case, in our bodies too. So if you are curious about it, we're going to be doing 3 books. We're going to have a book club in July, August, and September. And we're going to be reading Tell Me What You Want, The Ethical Slut, and Gender Outlaw. They're all great books, and I think we'll have really robust discussions about them. So you can go to my website, heathershannon.co. Again, that's heathershannon.co. It's right there on the homepage to learn more. And I will also link to the book club page right in the show notes. So I'm excited to kind of get to meet more of you too, and just have that community and engagement. We're also going to have a Telegram group, a little chat group thing that will go with the book club to kind of communicate in between. And Telegram is really great because we don't have to censor ourselves talking about sex. So right now on Instagram, I can't even spell the word sex without having to make the E into a 3 or spell it secks. And it pains me every time. So this is also why I do this work. So anyways, I hope to see many of you in the book club. I think it's going to be super fun. And you guys can also follow me on Instagram if you want to, or join my Ask a Sex Therapist Facebook group if you're looking to connect. So thank you guys for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.